I know this sounds incredibly stupid, but what does being a chud mean to you? It sort of sounds like I'm calling you a chud here, but whether you are or not doesn't qualify or disqualify you from being able to give an answer. I think everyone knows by now that chud stands for cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller, but the internet has certainly extrapolated what a chud qualifies as beyond just a 1984 sci-fi movie. So I think for today that I want to sort of label what a chud means to us today in a broader sense, and why the Chud movement is so prevalent, whether it be a genuine allegiance or just funny internet lingo. My obviously not real name is Wet Spork, and one of the things I like to do is extrapolate on things that likely don't need the extrapolation, and today, that happens to be the social intricacies of Chud life. I think for today, to ask you guys an unrelated question, what are your summer plans looking like? I don't really know so far myself, besides like working, but comment on that if you're interested, I guess. Anyways, to get back to the point, let's characterize the Chud. Now, we already established the original origin being from a sci-fi movie, but its transition into the internet scene originally started as a sort of left-wing insult to right-wing extremist. Instead of being along the lines of an underground sewer dweller, the Chud has effectively evolved into an underground, rage-baiting basement dweller that's probably exactly about what you're imagining they look like right now. Not exactly a pleasant comparison or visualization to make there, but you can probably throw in some of the key characteristics like raging misogyny and a weird race fixation to just throw on top. Anyways, it all sort of amounts to some niche internet slang battle between cyber political groups that likely do no more than shit talk each other towards actually moving their ideology forward. But Chud means quite a bit more than this at the modern time. It still holds some of the similarities to the original meaning, but it's definitely more encompassing. I'm sure Chud's use as political slander is still present, and that seems to be what main news sources are running with alongside the resurgence of the term, but I think that the people who run main news outlets are fucking idiots, and just assume the first Google search was all of what it meant. When people use Chud now, they're probably not really thinking about the complex political relationship it has, but more that it's a funny word like Sigma or LARPer or some shit like that. I think that Chud today is really just a term you use to describe someone who's a big bag, likely an incel, or gives off loser vibes in general, like yours truly. Even though it's definitely been mostly reduced to just a joke, there's also almost a sort of movement that comes alongside the popularization of the term as well. Then what does it come down to actually looking like? I think it really boils down to a sort of perceived brotherhood that already existed beforehand, but simply became more prevalent after the glorious lingo Chud was brought into their sites. You'll sort of see this type of archetype through fan bases like Demetrius Lime Jr., the recently deceased JTZ, and like the other guy. I forgot his name here, but like I have a picture, so here's that. While a lot of the fan base is definitely along for like the funny aspect, it's also a place of community for others as well. I mean, the outrage for JTZ was pretty big. The others here are mostly going to be your true selves who have likely had bad or unfortunate experiences with women, or maybe feel like they've been unfairly treated by society as a man and dislike the current internet culture. Of course, you can sort of sympathize with the cause here, but the unfortunate bit is that this dissatisfaction often ends up resulting in like inconsequential internet discourse and polarized views rather than like an actual call to positive action. I'm not an internet YouTube personality with a PhD in brain rot to go over the specific intricacies of the word Chud and then call it a day, so I'm going to do my thing and analyze the social characteristics of humanity that the Chud movement can help us identify and parallel. I think that probably the most obvious and perhaps maybe even admirable characteristic of humanity showcased by the Chud Force is their ability to let struggle be a uniting glue, no matter what that struggle may be. Having a happy and utopian-esque scenario is great, but the unfortunate reality of humans is that negative circumstances tend to imprint themselves upon us more intensely than positive ones. Think for instance about how when you're trying to go to sleep at night, and instead of reminiscing on everything that made you happy in life, it was that presentation you absolutely fumbled, and it's like for 2 hours. Like, I know that can't just be me. When many people are undergoing the same struggle, they can sympathize with each other and share their pain, building bonds stronger together than they ever would have should the experience not have arisen. Now, for the Chuds, this experience may be getting no bitches and being treated like shit by them, and while it's not exactly the same as weathering the tides of war with a fellow soldier, it's surprisingly similar in this specific result. Another sort of interaction we see is very similar to the previous one, but almost always more volatile in its efficiency. I don't mean to get all 1984 on you guys here, but if you read the book, you'd know that they're consistently in a perpetual state of war, whether it's legitimate or not. Having a common enemy is incredibly efficient at bringing people together, and even more so in preventing them from establishing actual means to solve problems. People are not only brought together by their fanatical hatred for the same entity, but this entity will become the target of all of their misfortunes, essentially a boogeyman of which they can pin all of their problems that they have no real target for or means to solve on, instead of staying in some realm of confusing and angry emotions. Now in the Chud Force, this common enemy may be something like feminism, the modern dating culture, progressive movements, or whatever the hell else, but a general dissatisfaction and placement of anger definitely is an important factor for the Chud community. Okay, I know we've been all silly going Chud this and Chud that, and while I want to clarify that Chuds aren't some mystical evil force, I want to talk about how these means of community can drag the same community down for an actual serious portion. The Chud community sort of brings itself to light as a group of people who feel like, because of factors they can't control, like their gender or appearance, they face discrimination from progressive movements, women, or just society in general, and to give them some credit, it's incredibly likely that they have. You know, like, to some extent. Perhaps the ideology or means by which they adopt in lieu of this are extreme or simply stupid, but it doesn't mean that the origin of them is completely some non-existent fabrication. Maybe the Chud Force can make itself a place where people can feel they belong, but it also perpetuates the same problem that forces them to need this community. When you become affected by and then surround yourself with people who are constantly obsessed by how they've been wronged by others without the express intent to move forward, it becomes a vicious cycle where people constantly convince themselves there's simply nothing they can do, whether it be on their own or with others. In the same way, the Chud Force sort of creates this environment where people simply complain about how the world has wronged them without any clear desire or pathway towards making positive changes towards fixing those problems, whether it really be in other people or simply themselves. This is obviously not limited to the Chud scene and can be present virtually anywhere a community arises, from those who have suffered yet don't seek to truly help themselves and others through it, and instead wallow in what is instead of what also can be. I guess, and I know this sounds stupid, the main point that I would take away from the existence of the Chud Force is that you are quite literally the only person with the best capability of helping yourself, even if helping yourself involves asking for the help of others and truly accepting it along the way. It can certainly feel satisfactory to share your burdens with other people, but it should also be a priority for you, especially if you truly want to eventually be freed from that burden, to work towards how you can actually achieve that goal. And if the people you're around are only focused on wallowing in their own misery instead of doing anything about it and trying to drag you with them, then fuck them. Either way, I think that's about all I have to say about all you little sweet chuddies for now, so have a good day and stay wet.